The purpose of this paper is to present some observations made during a long-term study of pottery making in the Western Balkans, made from the point of view of an archaeologist and potter. The focus of this interest began in the modern use of handwheels in that region, but has widened to include other kinds of wheels and devices used as primary forming aids here and more widely. I'd like to use this as a way to highlight the value and potential of ethnographic observation to archaeology, whether it's called ethnography or ethnoarchaeology, and ask for a better integration of such information in archaeological interpretive thought, on the basis that, while not serving as direct analogies for past behaviours, ethnographic detail at the very least widens the range of interpretive options available to archaeologists. With that in mind, I'd particularly like to draw attention to some ethnographic studies from Europe and North Africa, which seem little used in archaeological interpretations of pottery found in the same regions, which tend to use examples from South Asia and the Americas, where they make use of ethnography at all. The Western and Central Balkans, focused on the lands of the former Yugoslavia, probably exhibit, and certainly did so until very recently, greater diversity in pottery-making techniques and products than almost any other part of Europe, which is reflected in the continuing, sometimes concurrent use there of non-wheel, hand-wheel and foot-wheel technologies. Hand-wheel technology, by which I mean fixed or upwardly pivoted wheels powered mainly by hand rather than foot, is prevalent in western Serbia and extends throughout Bosnia and southern Croatia into western Slovenia. In these areas, it was the only forming device in use until the late 19th century, when Bosnian urban centres and some in northern Croatia experienced an influx of Serbian potters using movable axle or downwardly pivoted wheels propelled by foot. Such wheels, commonly called foot or kick wheels, are constituted from an upper working platform and lower flywheel attached to a shaft which rotates within a fixed bearing below the flywheel. In Serbia and Kosovo, this technology is usually associated with urban potters who derive most or all of their income from pottery, but in Western Croatia and Slovenia, potters using them were usually village-based and followed the potter-farmer model prevalent amongst handwheel potters. With respect to these various technologies, I would make the observation that wheel technology facilitates the use of techniques such as pinching, shaving and ring building that can also be practiced with non-wheel technology, as well as introducing others, notably rotational lifting or throwing. Use of a wheel does not determine which methods of forming can be used, but the principle of minimum effort for maximum return encourages potters to use its properties advantageously. Apart from providing an expanded range of options, its principal advantages are that it allows potters to maintain a fixed position in relation to the pot under construction and generates rotational kinetic energy, in some cases including centrifugal force, though not all fixed wheels provide this, nor is it necessarily always appropriate or advantageous for potters to make use of it. With respect to similarities and differences between hand and foot wheels, hand wheels tend to be used low to the ground, with the potter using their knee to stabilise the working hand or hands during use, while potters using the foot wheel tend to sit or stand upright, using their body or fixed equipment to stabilise the hands during forming. Both hand and foot operated wheels can be downwardly or upwardly pivoted. But in the West and Central Balkans, all hand wheels are upwardly pivoted and all foot wheels downwardly pivoted, as is broadly the pattern elsewhere. In the West and Central Balkans, as elsewhere, the fixed pivoted hand wheels comprise principally of a circular working platform which pivots upon a fixed bearing by means of a central socket or connected substructure. Two types are generally recognised. The less common, non-composite variety is hewn from a single piece of wood in the form of a truncated cone, a hole drilled vertically into the narrow hub end, serving as a shaft for the wooden pivot or spindle, which is fixed vertically in the ground or, more commonly, held in a movable wooden base. The principal source of variation within this form of wheel arises from the depth of the truncated cone. These are regarded as an older, more primitive variant, but there is no real evidence for this. The other, much more common type is the composite variant, made of a wooden disc joined to a cross-shaped substructure by 4 wooden struts or pegs. A hole drilled through the centre of the substructure serves as the guide or radial bearing for the wooden spindle, the upper pointed end of which sits in a notch, serving as the thrust bearing in the middle of the underside of the working platform. Considerably more variation in form, diameter, height and weight is apparent within this variant than the non-composite variety, and it is also more adaptable. The weight of wheels can be altered in various ways, such as by adding layers to the working platform or lumps of clay to the substructure. Other adaptations can include changing the diameter of the bearings, the pointedness of the thrust bearing, as well as lubrication. Depending on weight, bearings and other adaptations, the rotational characteristics of such wheels vary from rather poor to extremely good, allowing the wheel to rotate for a minute or more in a single episode. Such devices are very well attested in the ethnographic literature from around the world and also find their way into archaeological descriptions of the technology used to make pottery recovered from archaeological contexts, although the wheels themselves rarely survive there. Exceptions include apparent socketed wheels in stone from Egypt and in clay and from Bronze Age Crete. Terms used for them by archaeologists and ethnographers include socketed handwheel, slow wheel, simple fast wheel and tournette. But care should be taken not to conflate terms invoking perceptions of efficiency, such as fast and slow, with structural form, since different forms of device can be used in various, often unexpected ways. It's illuminating to compare these devices, those devices included in regional studies within the former Yugoslavia and Albania, with others described elsewhere. In his study of potters focused on Western Belarus, based on fieldwork in the late 1930s, Holubowitz identifies hundreds of workshops using mainly upwardly pivoted wheels in over 100 rural localities. He identifies numerous types and subtypes, but the basic two forms, composite and non-composite, appear similar to those described above. The main area of divergence is in the existence of proportionately much higher wheels, clearly intended for foot propulsion, and in the setting of some wheels in benches, which the potter sits astride. Bobrinsky also provides evidence for a similar level of variety in eastern Belarus and Russia, with both composite and non-composite variants set in a variety of boards, logs, raised benches, and higher composite wheels, some equipped with lower wheels intended for foot propulsion. Both Holubowitz and Bobrinsky also illustrate examples of downwardly pivoted wheels, with thrust bearing below and guide or radial bearing above, some of which are very similar in structure and mode of use to the higher fixed pivoted wheels. Vossen also describes several kinds of wheel in his wide-ranging account of Moroccan pottery-making technologies based on fieldwork in the 1980s. While all of the fixed pivoted variants seem to be of non-composite type set at ground level, they vary considerably in diameter and rotational efficiency. Vossen also includes an example made of fired clay, which is virtually the only case, apart from recent variants, made from car axles and washing machine drums, not made from wood, in all those reported ethnographically from Eurasia and North Africa. Both Vossen and Gunnar, who made similarly wide-ranging perambulations in the 70s to record pottery-making technologies in Anatolia, also include as wheel technology non-pivoted movable clay bases of bowl or conical-shaped profile, which also display rotational capacity and, in skilled hands, can provide pottery displaying apparent wheel-made attributes, notably at Gokgoy in western Turkey and Ifrin Ali in the Moroccan Rif. Since it is theoretically and practically possible to rotate such a device in a fixed position in relation to the potter's hand, it is arguable, as earlier suggested by Foster, that pottery made on such devices could also be regarded as wheel-made. Gunnar also defines three types of upwardly pivoted wheels used in Anatolia, all of non-composite form, which appear to vary, as in the Balkans, according to the depth of the thrust-bearing shaft. Elsewhere, the ethnographic literature attests to the use of fixed pivoted handwheels within the last century or so in France, Iberia, Cyprus, Romania, Georgia and Dagestan, as well as other extensive parts of the Western former Soviet Union covered by Bobrinsky. It is almost certain that other examples had been recorded or could yet be identified in other parts of North Africa, the Caucasus and Central Asia, while many other examples of such wheels in wood, stone and ceramic are reported in India and Southeast Asia. Returning to the Balkans, in the central part of the region we're most concerned with, Bosnia and southern Croatia, apart from urban potters in the 19th and 20th century, virtually all pottery making was and is done using hand wheels as part of a technological complex which also included, in the main, use of coarse pastes, predominantly calcite, and open firing. This partly explains the use of hand wheels where other choices are available, since it isn't practical to rapidly throw very coarse pastes, which may include up to 40% particles of calcite up to 3 or 4 millimeters in diameter, due to the risk of weakening or even tearing the fabric. A slower approach is called for, which for most vessels in most places involves ring building of the walls to achieve the basic vessel form, followed by one or more of various other techniques to raise, thin and shape the walls. Amongst the latter are vertical and diagonal scraping and rotational lifting or throwing. It is significant that forming processes which involve ring building or coiling always involve turning the wheel in different directions, one to slowly add the rings by squeezing onto the top of the incipient wall as it turns, the other to shape or throw. And all potters in this region using the hand wheel remove their pots from the wheel by cutting around the lower walls with a wooden knife, thereby freeing the pot, the base of which was dusted with a separator and only attached to the wheel by adhesion of its outer perimeter, which also involved rotating the wheel in the opposite direction to ring building. So it is not unusual for a potter to change the direction of a wheel many dozens of times during the forming of a single pot, a process made difficult when using a heavy, high-momentum wheel. It's also worth pointing out that small pots can be made quickly and efficiently from a single piece of clay on a very low momentum wheel using single-handed techniques, with the potter turning the wheel with one hand and applying pressure to the incipient walls of the pot with the other, usually with the thumb inside and fingers outside. In these circumstances, the potter turns the wheel continuously, but as long as they maintain a fixed position in relation to the clay and fixed pressure on the incipient walls, it doesn't matter if the wheel doesn't maintain a fixed speed, since the clay is still displaced upwards whenever it passes between finger and thumb. In this sense, the technique could be characterized as rotational pinching or lifting rather than throwing, which implies the use of centrifugal force. Alternatively, an assistant can be used to turn the wheel, as at Trapsano in Crete and at several occasions in Morocco visited by Vossen, in which case two hands can be engaged. It's also worth observing that the forming of pots from coarse fabrics in this way is aided by use of soft, sometimes extremely soft, clay pastes, which, though requiring less energy to manipulate, demand high levels of skill to use. So, the hand wheel is a highly adaptable tool which costs little to make, can be stored out of the way when required, and assists with the manufacture of pots using a variety of techniques which arguably become more constrained when the wheel becomes heavier rather than lighter. Heavy wheels with high momentum come into their own for throwing large quantities of pots in fine or relatively fine fabrics, but may be entirely unsuitable for use with coarse fabrics, let alone questions about the need to produce such high quantities of pottery and the level of investment required to achieve it. In the Western Balkans, the type of wheel appears less important in terms of speed of work than the fabric and forms of pots made and the skill, strength and desire of the potter concerned. At Potravlia, the potters Jure and Dusan Knežević could increase the height of a vessel by 10 to 15 centimetres in a single revolution with the act of adding and simultaneously thinning rings of clay, thereby producing large cooking vessels in 5 to 10 minutes, faster than some potters using kick wheels. Potters in other locations have been observed to work at greatly varying rates. This means that while differences in the size and structure of wheels can have functional implications, there should be no credence given to any ideas about the perceived superiority of any technology over another, or to the kinds of evolutionary model espoused in the past, where hand wheels or turntables are considered somehow inferior, as if their users have not yet been exposed to superior technology. Thus, while relatively finely tempered, decorated wares are produced exclusively, wheels with greater momentum are used to allow relatively fast throwing. Elsewhere, in the main, lighter wheels are preferred to give greater flexibility in terms of the techniques practiced upon them. At Ulice in northern Bosnia, despite much lighter wheels, adaptations including single-handed lifting and use of very soft pastes allow forming speeds comparable with those where heavier wheels are used in central Bosnia, resulting in vessels with similar visible attributes. From an archaeological perspective, in view of the arguments presented above, it is the techniques, rather than the form of the wheel itself, that can best be recognised, since there is no given correlation between the form of a wheel and the way it is used. The mode of use of a wheel should be seen as an integral part of the technical complex and social environment of pottery making, where it is determined by the potter based on a range of factors including qualities of the clay paste used, shape and size of vessels needed, and social economic need or desire to work. Based on observation of Balkan potters, it is usually, though not always, possible on the basis of physical attributes to recognise when a pot has been thrown, and sometimes possible to determine when it has been wheel-made, even if obvious throwing marks are absent. Sometimes signs of ring or coil building are visible as imperfect joints, but in the main they are removed by subsequent actions such as rotational lifting and diagonal scraping. Techniques such as particle alignment recognition may betray the use of ring building, but in practice the way that rings are applied by smoothing onto the inside rim of the incipient vessel makes this less likely, especially if soft pastes are used. Arguably, the only universal attributes of vessels made on fixed pivoted wheels in this region concern vessel bases, which are rarely wire cut, but removed by slicing away the lower walls with a wooden knife, as described above. This produces on the pot an impression of the wheel base, including any decorative marks cut into it, as well as traces of the separator material used, and often a slight ridge around the exterior caused by tool compression. It's also worth making the point that while attributes of form, base and surface treatment may provide broad level indicators of certain aspects of forming technique, they cannot hope to reflect anything like the full range of differences in forming practices or wheel technology seen ethnographically. We should not lose sight of the fact that ethnographic observation is important for its own sake, creating a picture of pottery production and use in the recent past which is inevitably much richer and more complex than that inferred from the pottery products alone. For example, at Kalajerevac and Otej, settlements 4 kilometers apart either side of the river Lika in Croatia, differences in wheel technology and forming practices probably reflected differences in the origins of the potters after post-Ottoman resettlement of the area in the 17th century, but are not reflected in the consumer-led appearance of the pots produced. Wider observation in the region indicates that technologies practiced by potters are remarkably consistent within communities and very stable over time, with technique more resilient than technological aids. Thus, when a downwardly pivoted footwheel was imported in the 1970s to Mališići and adopted by the next generation of potters, there was no apparent change in forming practices, with ring building and rotational lifting still used at low revolutions per minute, despite the difficulties involved in changing the rotational direction of the wheel and the requirement for certain physical contortions to achieve it. Similarly, the potters of Paraduela in northern Spain have recently replaced traditional fixed-pivoted composite wooden handwheels with footwheels equipped with extremely small diameter, low-mass flywheels in order to maintain ring building and rotational lifting techniques. Finally, in terms of potential for further work, more ethnographic fieldwork could and should be carried out based on the wide-scale but relatively low-intensity regional studies mentioned above, using repeated visits to focus on the medium and long-term dynamic interrelationships between different parts of the pottery-making equilibrium. Related to ethnographic work should be experimentation to explore means of associating forming techniques with physical attributes on fired clay vessels, including RPM variations with different fabrics and forms, wherever possible carried out in close cooperation and discussion with traditional potters themselves. However, time is now very short for such initiatives, given the rapidly diminishing potential offered by practicing potters in Eurasian contexts. Existing ethnographic literature should be made more readily available for use by translating from diverse languages the works of Lubovitz and others already mentioned above. With respect to the Western Balkans in particular, where coarse cooking wares retain high cultural and functional value in some areas, there remains some potential for detailed research in the handful of surviving centres of traditional pottery making, 3 of which, significantly, continue to produce calcite tempered fabrics. Perhaps offering greatest potential are 3 surviving potteries within 20 kilometres of one another in northern Bosnia, one using handwheel technology to produce sand-tempered coarsewares, another using a recently adopted footwheel to produce calcite-tempered coarsewares of similar form, and a third urban potter using footwheel and kiln-firing technologies originally imported from eastern Serbia to produce a similar range of vessels. Issues to be explored here include the resilience and potential visibility through perceivable vessel attributes of technological variations, Vossen's local or regional technological dialects or languages, and how they might be able to suggest relationships in time and space between different producers. Such work might be expected to feed positively into archaeological studies by expanding the basis for interpretation, leading to a more nuanced understanding of the complex interrelationships involved in pottery-making systems.